Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading back to college because education is important for a collection of horrifying stories. I would also like you to welcome Miss Fearsome, who will be joining us in today's stories. But for now it's time to get comfortable, grab a pen, and let the darkness take control. This happened 13 years ago, while I was in my freshman year of college. I knew a girl from high school that went to my university, so being a freshman, I was in a dorm, but she was in an apartment since it was her second year. One night, I'm with her at her place and decide to call a cab back to my dorm. It's not too late, but the sun has basically set, and the half-hour walk from her apartment to my dorm is isolated and dark. A cab ride was 5 minutes and a few bucks, so it was definitely the safer and faster option. Anyway, my friend is waiting with me on the sidewalk for the cab. We are right outside her apartment building. As we're waiting, a man in a wheelchair, who looks like he's in his 40s, appears on the sidewalk and stops to talk to us as he's going past. He asked what we're doing, and we casually mentioned that I was waiting for a cab to go back to my dorm. He then said that we should cancel it, and he could keep me company on my way back to where I was heading. He said something like, "It's not that far, don't waste your money." He even laughed, pointing to his wheelchair, and said something along the lines of, "It's not like you have to worry about me. I'm in a wheelchair." I don't remember the entire conversation, but you get the idea. Mind you, this was a few minutes of him trying to convince us to call the cab and cancel. It was not a quick conversation. He finally went on his way before the cab arrived. Flash forward 2 or 3 days later. In this college town, most of the bars let you in at 19 because they were considered nightclubs. So that same friend and I are at the bar. The bar makes their announcement that they're closing and all the lights come on. I look over, and who do I see a few feet away trying to talk to girls our age as they walk past him? The very same man. He was bald and clearly older than everyone else in the bar, so he stood out like a sore thumb. And guess what? He's standing and walking around like normal. I grabbed my friend to take a look and see if it was the same guy, and she confirmed it was. To this day, I've never left a bar so quickly. I can only imagine why he was pretending to be in the wheelchair. And when he said, "You have nothing to worry about, I'm in a wheelchair," it suddenly becomes far more ominous. Imagine the possibilities, what he would have done, lulling me into a false sense of security on that dark and isolated walk, to do who knows what.
It was my freshman year of college. I was living in the freshman dorms, and there were 4 floors to this building. The first floor had community spaces, televisions, laundry, ice machines, and a kitchenette. And the 3 other floors were all residential, gender separate with communal bathrooms. Each tiny room had 2 beds and a long desk to share, along with 2 closets and 2 vanities with mirrors. The buildings on campus were historic, particularly the freshman dorms, and that dorm was the oldest building on campus that used to house nuns. Before the college was co-ed, before it was an all-girls college, a particular order of nuns came to the area to teach the budding community. The city is now a very diverse and very large, well-known bustling gateway to the south, but this school is known for its art programs, as well as its programs for special education, sports therapy and speech therapy, so there were twice as many girls as there were young men, and a good portion of them had sports scholarships. I myself joined the bowling team, whilst getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I was roomed on the 4th floor with a nice young woman pursuing a career in physical sports therapy. She was an absolutely amazing basketball player, but I had never had any interest in sporting events in my life, and found myself cheering her on during games and even watching games with her on our shared TV. For 2 opposite people, we both enjoyed sharing the art world and the sports world, and I'd invite her to art student parties, and she would take me along when any team hosted a party. Directly across the hall was a showroom for the dorm, which was empty every year, and no one was assigned that room ever. The faculty generally wouldn't talk about why the room had to remain empty, even though the campus was very, very small, and any space was usually utilized. Now, rooming with an athlete, I got to smell daily the uniforms, shoes, and a basketball she kept, and sometimes she would dribble it in the room. Other girls had this same habit. I became aware of the dead girl across the hall on the same night of a large party celebrating a streak of victories. That night I was working on a large project, so I gave my roommate some congratulations and a hug, but excused myself from the party. She understood and promised to bring me a few pizza slices. Then I worked pretty late into the night, playing music at a low volume and waiting on the return of my roomie, so I knew she would be safe for the night, i.e. no drinking and driving. The dorm was eerily quiet, so quiet that the sound of a bouncing basketball surprised me, and I was curious to see who was back, so I left our room to explore and find out. As I opened my door, the smell of basketballs and a newly waxed court was overpowering. I could still hear the ball and wanted to say hi, so I went looking through the floor. There was no one in any room, even the RA was gone, so I moved down to the 3rd floor, and the smell was fading. The ball, however, I could hear sounded like it was above me. I knocked on doors, but again everyone had gone to the party. On the 2nd floor, the smell and sound were gone, and the only living person I could find was that floor's RA. I explained to her the odd noise and smell, and she was curious, so together we searched the building to find no other living soul. But when we reached my room, the RA admitted hearing the basketball in the room across the hall, but no one was supposed to enter that room, and it was always locked, so we were both a bit creeped out. The RA called a security guard to come check it out, as she didn't have a key, and he heard the ball too. He told us no one would be in there, but he unlocked the door, and as he turned the knob, the sound stopped and the smell vanished. When we looked in, not a soul, nor a basketball could be found. Later I talked to the most senior guard, and he informed me that there were paranormal investigations done due to any student assigned to the room refusing to sleep there. Apparently, when the college was an all-girls school, a young lady who was known for her love of basketball had tragically taken her own life in that room. The college had hushed the event up as much as possible, but I eventually found an article through some rigorous research at the city library. So for the rest of that year, whenever I was alone late at night, I'd smell the poor girl and hear her basketball. I got to the point where I would say good morning or good night when no one was close by, and I did a small drawing of her, wrote a note about how sorry I was that she felt so much pain, then slipped both under the door to her. I never found out why she'd done what she did, and I don't know if my note or drawing was ever found. I just know the ball stopped when I said goodnight. I hope maybe having someone know her story helped her to move on, but I'll never know for sure.
Rewind to my freshman year of college, sometime in mid-autumn. I was 18, living in the dorms and almost fully recovered from being sick with shingles. I was walking towards the elevator to go running. Our hall was the only one of the dorms that had an elevator. It was supposed to be for physically disabled people, but we didn't have anyone in our hall who was disabled, so it was almost never used. I was the only one who really ever used it. I figure I'm running 5 miles today. I can afford to be a little lazy. He appeared as I was walking towards the elevator. Pale skin, dark hair, just standing there dressed like a college student, and looked to be about that age. He wore plaid shorts and a t-shirt. He was transparent and barely discernible against the backdrop of the deserted elevator. I could barely see him, but he was there. There was no one else around. He looked at me, none too kindly, and I noticed that he had pale yellow eyes, no pupils, just yellow eyes that shone like lights, and the air around me had become very, very cold. It freaked the hell out of me. I booked it towards the elevator, and as I got near it, he vanished, and so did the cold. I went down, did my work and came back. I don't believe I ever used the elevator again, and I've never seen anything like him since. For what it's worth, I went to a private religious university, and I'm currently back here for my master's program. Though this experience was in 2011, and obviously I had no reason to visit the dorms again. I don't really know what that was, and I don't particularly care to know. Could have just been a weird side effect of shingles. I know it can do odd things to your neurology, or who knows, it could have been something more sinister. Just interesting that even now, I still think about it, and it makes me shake.
Now, I currently go to a small public liberal arts college on the west coast of the United States. I'm a freshman, female and 18, and I keep to myself mainly. But I have a few close friends here, one of whom will be an important part of the story. All was well for the first few weeks of college. I went to all my classes, did my work, and went on interesting adventures. Then one day I met Matt. Matt's one of those people that you can tell there's something off, just by looking at them. He always has this weird glint in his eye, and always looks like he hasn't showered in a week. So I was sitting in the campus meal hall by myself, minding my own business and enjoying a chicken sandwich, when Matt plopped himself down beside me. Now, while I may be an introvert, I still consider myself a friendly person, so I attempted to make polite conversation with him. He just asked me a bunch of weird questions, like my exact schedule, and stared at me awkwardly. I was feeling increasingly uncomfortable, so pretended I had class to get to, and promptly left the place. For the next few weeks, the situation occasionally repeated itself, and as I'm a bit of an extreme doormat, I would entertain his odd ramblings, always games, until I got uncomfortable enough to excuse myself and go elsewhere. Hey, maybe the guy just needed friends. But then it got weirder. Every weekend our college puts together a modified version of a game called Humans vs. Zombies, which is basically a big Nerf gun and foam sword fight. It's tons of fun and a good workout, so I go when I have the chance and energy to do so. One week Matt showed up. Let me make this clear. Matt is one of those people who despises all physical activity. A Humans vs. Zombies is something that would be incredibly low on the list of things Matt would want to do. He awkwardly asked for my phone number, then asked me out, both of which I politely declined. Then thankfully we split off into separate starting groups. But he would always just happen to run into me for the rest of the night, and it was really obvious he was following me. I stopped going to Human vs. Zombies as often after that. Then I decided to join the anime club, at the behest of my friend James. And for the first few weeks everything was cool. It was weeaboo free. The president liked to bring in her kitten occasionally, and everyone was pretty nice. One of them even gave me a ditto with perfect IVs. We were even planning an anime convention and taking volunteers for it, when then Matt showed up to a meeting. Matt doesn't watch anime. He sat next to me and launched into his usual ramblings and weird questions, which I ignored whilst pretending to be engrossed in my copy of Pokemon X. Then James showed up, and I immediately jumped to him, pretending I needed to ask him something. Matt signed up to volunteer at the convention, but didn't really attend meetings after that. And when he did attend the one right before the con, he spent the whole time complaining about the shifts he had been assigned. So convention day rolled around, and as I was a volunteer, I was not in cosplay. My job was to go around and make sure everyone was behaving themselves, and that cosplayers in full body paint had remembered to seal it before arriving. We got into trouble for that last year, apparently. People were mostly tame, but the only incident of note was that I had to get some Assassin's Creed cosplayers down from a bridge because they had climbed up there for a photo op, and if they had fallen, we would have gotten in trouble. I decided to sign up for the Pokemon X and Y tournament they were holding. I got in free since I was working at the convention. But so did Matt. And to be fair, this one was probably because he liked Pokemon too. but he was still creepy to me whilst he was there. I ended up taking 4th place. Thank you, 6IV Greninja. And Matt was knocked out in the 2nd round of the double elimination tournament. Around the 6th or 7th round, Matt asked me why I was hanging around if I had already been knocked out. Keep in mind he was doing the same thing, and I replied that I was still in the tournament, and he flipped out, insisting I was lying and saying things like, "Why would you still be in the tournament? You don't ever want to battle me," as if a non-willingness to battle meant I was a terrible trainer. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I never wanted to battle him because I thought he was creepy, but then they called me up for the semi-final and he promptly shut up. I lost that round, sadly, but it was a damn close fight. I spent the rest of the convention wandering the dealer's hall and doing my shifts, which were pretty much watching over anime rooms, whilst about 5 people watched the first few episodes of popular anime. I didn't see Matt again for the rest of the day, and when I brought James his lunch whilst he was on duty, he offered to pay for mine if I went and stood in the really long line to get us both food. He informed me that he was working a double shift now, because Matt, who was supposed to have taken over James's shift at the video game room, had left in a huff after the Pokemon tournament. James gave me a bottle of mango soda for my trouble, and I went about the rest of my day. Things went normally for a few weeks, and Matt kept happening by me whilst I was alone, and I kept brushing him off. However, whilst James and I were having lunch, Matt rudely inserted himself into our conversation. He just sat down at our table without even asking. James and I were both sick of Matt by now, so I gave James a pointed look and talked about how awful it was when we were confronted by people who just won't take hints, making it seem like I was continuing a previous story. James got the hint and joined in with me. Matt got angry and called me heartless, insisting that I should just give guys a chance sometime, and the fact that we were talking about him went right over his head. After that, I didn't see Matt until after spring break, which ended just last week, when James and I, along with our mutual friend Megan, were enjoying some lunch together. Just then James, who was sitting across from me, alerted me to the fact that Matt had just entered the meal hall. I thought, ugh, forget this, and decided to go hide out near the waffle irons to wait for him to go away. Whilst I was there, I made the first waffle I was ever able to make in one of those things, without the batter sticking to the grids. So that's good, I guess. Then I decided the coast must be clear by now, and wandered back to the table. But I was wrong. Matt was still standing there talking to James, and he hadn't seen me yet though, so I kind of bolted away in the other direction towards the dishwasher. I hid behind a wall there and nearly knocked over a girl trying to put her dishes away, but I explained that I was hiding from a dude who wouldn't take a hint, and she gave me an understanding nod and went on her way. Eventually Matt left, and I returned to the table, and the first thing out of James's mouth when I sat down was, "He was asking about you," to which I gave a little shudder. James had told him to go away, which Matt had done, but angrily. That night I had a craving for popcorn, but with 4 boxes of microwave popcorn and no microwave, I had a problem. Thankfully, the combined campus mailroom and lounge has one, which I've made frequent use of since arriving here. It was pitch dark out, but I've always felt safe walking alone on campus at night, because it's well lit and campus police patrols around a lot. So I went to the lounge, popped my popcorn, and started to head back down the path to my dorm, when I heard a familiar sound behind me. Now, one thing I'd forgotten to mention about Matt was that he's literally always pulling and rolling a backpack behind him, so his presence is thankfully always announced by the sound of rolling wheels. I turned around, and lo and behold, there was Matt behind me, pulling his backpack. He was about 30 feet behind me, and just looking in my general direction. Normally I'm more just generally creeped out at Matt rather than terrified of him, but it was dark and we were alone, so I booked it to my dorm and ran inside, then locked the door to my room behind me. I don't know if he chased me or not, but I sure hope he doesn't know which room I live in. I haven't seen him since. Maybe I was being paranoid at that last one, but I didn't want to take any chances. I intend to take this up with campus police and/or security if this continues.
My campus wasn't even that old, though it did used to be a tuberculosis ward, and I've heard people saying some weird stuff about it. I'll preface this by saying that nothing specifically happened to me, other than one kind of thing. Let me get into it. My freshman year here, I lived in a brand new dorm. Like these had opened for actual students for the very first time, so there was no reason for anyone to think these were haunted. Fast forward maybe a month or so, and my roommate comes up to me and asks me if anything weird has happened to me. Of course I'm like, nah. But she's really upset, and basically tells me she thinks she's being haunted. She claims some weird stuff would happen, and one day she came back, and though her room was locked, she found these little knickknacks she had all around her room lined up on her bed. She also said when hanging out with her friend, one of them heard someone whisper their name and the other told them to knock it off, cue realizing that the other had never actually said anything. She also said she had a really alarming dream she mistook for reality, where she was in her dorm room and felt like she was being watched. She said she looked up and there was a cute guy, and she was like, "Oh, hi," all flirty, but then realized at some point that this guy was off. So she said, "Well, tell me you love God," and his face immediately turned to a scowl and he huffed, "You shouldn't have said that." And it got really scary until she woke up, but was in the exact same position she'd been in the dream, with all the lights on. Now I should also acknowledge here that my roommate wasn't partially religious at the time, and I hadn't known her very long, but she's probably one of the most level-headed people I've met. She's not a dreamy airhead. She was like the president or VP of college Republicans on campus. And, okay, political commentary aside, she was really serious and factual, and super into politics, not the kind of person you would think would make up silly stuff. But these first few months I knew her, she was like invisible tears, and would refuse to come back and live in the dorms. She'd spend all of her time at the library, and was so upset she even asked my Wiccan friend what to do. Of course, since I'm a paranormal too spooky nerd, I of course was like, "You have to be firm and tell whatever it is to get the hell out," which she did. This roommate after this became very religious. Eventually stuff seemed to settle down for her, but not before a few weird things happened. One of the roomies reported nothing, while the other, who was a bit dramatic and could have made stuff up, reported her angel statue would keep twisting in the night to face away from her. The only thing that happened to me that was strange was the day before Christmas break upon returning. I walked near, but not touching my mirror, and it fell over and shattered. I didn't think this was possible because it was a cheap, crappy Walmart mirror, and it was just leaning against the wall, so long that it kind of caved into it. I didn't even think it could break. I thought it was plastic or something, and it could have fallen at any time, so I thought it was weird that it decided to fall and shatter when I walked like a foot past it. I mean, it was probably nothing, right? People on the 4th floor reported that their stuff would go missing, and locked windows would suddenly open, pissing some people off when stuff got snowed on, and they thought it was their roommates who opened it. People found their keys in places that they looked. Some people also said they supposedly saw 2 spirits, one large shadow figure they thought was a large man, and a little girl. They said the little girl was supposedly the one who liked to hide stuff, and I think some dumbasses used a Ouija board and claimed the shadow figure was a guardian or something. Nobody believes anything else that happened because of mob mentality. But one time after hearing my roommate's experience, the entire 4th floor ended up cramming into my dorm to hear my roommate talk about it. The one particularly disturbing story I heard came from a guy down the hall. He told me he'd never had any recurring dreams before, but after moving here, he had the same one 7 nights in a row. I'll skip some details because since it was involved, but in the dream he moved into a house with his dream girlfriend. He was single at the time. He would end up hearing a scream at some point that was always a false alarm, and leave the house for a while, and when he'd return he'd find her facing away from him with scissors in her hand, into every surface of the house. He said the words, "It'll be all right," were carved deeply, and when she turned around, she proceeded to violently murder herself with the scissors, and he'd be forced to watch for a while before waking up. The thing he said that rattled him the most was that "it would be all right." The phrase etched into every surface was basically what his personal life philosophy boiled down to, and he said that it felt as though it were mocking him. I don't know. Take this with a grain of salt, but this is from a few years ago. I also have another story that my other roommate from the same school told me that happened to her. Basically, she lived in a completely separate dorm, one that wasn't, I think, typically considered haunted or anything. My school does do occasional ghost tours in October because even the staff there are like, yeah, okay, something's weird. Her story boils down to that she heard scratching in her dorm a lot, coming from the bathroom, and growling as if there were a dog, but there was no dog there. She has claimed to see 2 full-body apparitions. One, she said, was out of the corner of her eye, a woman in a hospital gown facing away from her, while the other, the one that really freaks her out, there was an apparition of a guy that really freaked her out. I can't remember most of what she said happened, but they kind of knew he was around. He supposedly had some sort of attachment to my roommate, and most noticeably acted out when she and her other roommate were preparing to leave. According to my roommate, her other roomie was talking to her late while packing, and suddenly got super pale and insisted they both leave. When they got out, her roomie said she saw the guy standing behind her, with the most hostile expression she'd ever seen. My roommate says she has a feeling this guy was about our age, and she thinks maybe he ended his own life, but she could never find any information on who he actually was. She always described him very clearly as wearing this particular sort of sweater, sort of maybe 80s style, with a distinctly separate color section. The roommate is also very level-headed, and I've never known her to lie, and is one of the chillest people I've ever met. She also knows the cops on campus and told me supposedly one time they got a call about a woman down by the older buildings on staff doing rounds, thinking she was lost or suspicious, and cops went down, and I can't remember what, but she said she saw this woman in like an old-timey blue dress that then vanished when they got closer, and it seriously freaked them out.
This happened about 4 to 5 years ago, but I remember it like it happened 20 minutes ago, because it was so absolutely crazy. It's Wednesday, roughly 2 p.m. I work security for a local university, and today I'm stuck inside manning the desk and phones. We have our main security office right at our main entrance, and the entire office has glass walls, so the students can always see that we are present and there to help. 95% of people who come into the security office are just lost students. Now personally, I love my job. It's great for someone who is as physically broken as me. But I digress. This girl, approximately 22 years old, rushed in and was in a visible panic. She opened up and told me that we needed to start evacuating the campus so students didn't die. Now, writing her side of the story will be a bit difficult, because I'm unable to properly display the outright panic and insanity. I told her to calm down and tell me what she thought was going on. And she said, again in utter panic, "There is a bomb attached to the front of a coffee machine in the cafeteria on the 4th floor." "What makes you think it's a bomb?" I asked, which is a reasonable question, I thought. "Listen, idiot. I know what a bomb looks like. It's this black device held on the front of the machine where you put change in. It's counting down and has a blinking red light that's blinking faster and faster. If we don't start evacuating students now, people will die. Do you want the death of students on your hands?" "Ma'am, please calm down. You might scare other students." "Look, I'll go check it out, and if what you say is true, we will call the police and get everyone to safety," is what I said. But what I wanted to say was, "Jesus Christ, you're insane. Calm down." I told her to wait at the desk whilst I went and looked at it. and I got to the coffee machine in question. I immediately saw what she thought was a bomb, but gave the machine a good look over, just to be safe. The bomb in question was the power converter that was on the floor that was about 4 feet away from the machine. I gave a little chuckle and headed back to the office, and when I got there, I saw that she'd gone. So I told some of my co-workers and 2 of my bosses about it. We had a great laugh, and after about 15 minutes, the bomb lady came rushing into the office, like she'd just witnessed a murder. Which was surprising to see, because she was a large person. Now she was in an even bigger panic than before, and after running in, she said, "We need to evacuate and get the SWAT team here now. The whole school is in danger." "Mum, please calm down," I said. "What's the problem?" "You have an ISIS terrorist installing bombs in the library," she wailed. And yes, that's exactly what she said, word for word. I asked, "Mum, what makes you think he's a terrorist and installing bombs in our library?" "He gave away his identity when he refused to give me his fake IDs." "Excuse me?" I said in disbelief. "Yes. I'm a homicide detective. I demanded to see his passport, his proof of citizenship, his green card and his social insurance number. But he refused to give them to me because he knows they're fake. And I know how to spot fakes," she babbled. Now in my mind I was cursing this chick out, shouting horrible things again and again. "Mum, you aren't allowed to do that to someone. If you felt there was something wrong, you should come to us or call the police." "I'm allowed to do what I want. I'm a private investigator. It's you guys that have limits." Yes, you heard that right. She went from homicide detective to private investigator in under a few seconds. But it gets better. So she continued to yell about how we aren't acting fast enough in the evacuation and students were going to die. I just kept telling her to lower her voice because she could cause a panic, which could lead to a whole mess of other issues. This went on for only a few minutes. As you see, the person who she claimed was an ISIS member installing bombs in the library walked into our office. Now before I continue, I just want you to try to imagine the person someone would mistake for a terrorist. Probably someone of colour, possibly wearing a turban. Things of that nature, right? But boy, would you be wrong this time. What walked in was a 55-year-old white guy with pure grey hair. And on top of that, he was in full janitor uniform, ID badge on show, tools in his belt, the whole 9 yards. It still boggles my mind at how someone could ever think this guy was a terrorist. So he walked in and said in the nicest possible way, "Excuse me, this young lady seems to think I'm somebody I'm not. I just wanted to clear up this mistake, as I have to finish installing new shelves in the library." Bomb Psycho heard him, whipped around, and her face turned to pure terror and anger, like she'd just watched a queen xenomorph and have rough sex with her mum. She pointed to him and screamed, "How dare you allow this ISIS asshole into the same room as me? He's going to kill us all and none of you seem to care." "Mum, if he bothers you so much, let's move to the hallway to talk." Thankfully she did, but once we got out there, she went off again. "You filthy rent-a-cops are so fired. We're on code red. The city is in danger. Just wait until I put this on the news today. You'll all lose your jobs for not taking this threat seriously." "Excuse me?" I said. "I'm an investigative journalist for local news network. You're all gone once this hits the 6 o'clock news. You're risking the lives of thousands just by having that piece of crap here." "Mum, I'm not going to tell you again. Either lower your voice or we will remove you from the premises. Now look, if you want, we will call the police and you can come sit in our office where it's safe and give your side of the story to them." "I've done nothing wrong. You can't hold me here against my will. And besides, why would I want to stay on a campus that's about to explode?" "Okay, well, if you want to make things easier, just leave your details with us, and we will pass them on to the police so they can contact you at your leisure. Is that okay?" "I don't have to give you anything, you pig. You're nothing but trash." Just wait until I put it on the news that the security at the university doesn't care about their students and wants thousands of children dead. Then she just walked off. So to the crazy lady who wanted to incite panic and changed her jobs 3 times in under 20 minutes, let's not meet again, please.
This happened back in 2009, when I was an 18-year-old kid in culinary school, attached to a lounge of our own, located behind the cafeteria. Couples liked going there because it was always empty and partially dark. I hated it, because it had a back door leading to the parking lot that was barely lit. Barely anyone parked there, so I found it creepy. Plus, being a horror fan, I knew that it was a perfect opportunity for things to go wrong. Long story short, I come out of class one day, and this kid I don't know starts walking up to me, almost confrontational-like. I have my knife set with me, and pull out a handle readying to defend myself. He stops and hands me a paper, which read, "Meet me in the lounge." I looked at him in confusion and asked who sent the note. Was it my boyfriend, or someone else in the culinary program, or maybe a friend from high school? He shakes his head and says he doesn't know, but I should go. I question him on what this person looks like, and he refuses to give me any information. I chuckle nervously and put the note in my pocket and walk past the kid to head to class. He starts following me, asking me if I'm going to go, and I try to ignore him, heading towards the library to get into a public place. He follows and tries to tell me I should go, that it's my destiny or some crap along those lines. I glare at him and pick up the pace, trying to head downstairs to the cafeteria in hopes of finding a classmate and losing the kid. He runs at the same pace, telling me he doesn't understand why I'm not going. I tell him, because I don't want to, now go away, and head into the cafeteria. By this point he's really creeping me out. I grab for my phone to call the police, but instead see a classmate and run towards him. The kid follows me, pointing towards where the lounge is, and telling me I'm going the wrong way. I instantly panic and tell my classmate what's going on. He approached the kid and told him to leave me alone, that I have a boyfriend and I'm not interested. The kid tells me that they're waiting for me in the lounge and to not take too long. His words still give me chills. My classmate walks me to our student restaurant and asks for some others to come with us. 3 of my other colleagues come with us to the lounge, but there's no one there. I get freaked out and decide I need to go home. They walk me through the campus to the parking lot, where I call my parents to get a ride. One of the others stays with me, while the classmate who defended me goes off to report the behavior to our teachers, who use the lounge as secondary offices sometimes. He then comes back to tell me they're going to investigate and keep an eye out for suspicious activity or that kid. A few days later, I learned that a girl had been assaulted in that area, having parked there during finals and gone through the lounge. The school newspaper had reported it, but there were no details as to who did it and if they were caught. I literally felt my stomach drop, hoping the girl was okay and hoping that those people got caught. I reported my incident to the newspaper team, but they claimed she never dealt with anything like a note, and they never found the suspects. My mum is glad I listened to my gut and didn't go. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it. The girl recovered. She got jumped but had no money, so they left her, and escaped with a few minor injuries. They never caught the attackers, and I never saw the strange kid again. All I can think of is, why me? If they're going for money. I was so poor I literally lived off sesame crackers donated by my classmates because I had no money. I'm just glad that the girl is okay, and that I listened to my gut. Who knows what would have happened if I'd have gone. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so very much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's university stories, which is what we call it here in England. If you did, please be sure to let me know. I really do appreciate it. Comments are valued very highly, and there's been a big diminish in the comments. Maybe it's because I haven't been replying to many lately, but please do keep leaving them. I do enjoy reading them, even if I don't have the time right now, new baby and all, to reply to many or any right now. Sorry. But I do value them, and also the algorithm punishes me if I don't get any. So, leave them, please. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. I would like to extend a huge thank you to my members and patrons, and of course to Miss Fearsome, who helped tremendously with this video. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to hear more of her work, and, well, most of you probably should, you can check out the link to her channel, which can be found in the description and should be on screen now. Just go ahead, give it a click. You'll like it. Oh, leave me a like too before you go. That'd be nice. But for now, it's time for me to say goodbye. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.